Welcome to the session Perspectives on Urban Mobility. We have 4 fantastic speakers here today with you, and I will take you through the session and what is in store for you. So to begin with, gender, but that's not an important topic for urban mobility. Didn't we achieve gender equality ages ago? Well, this session is going to take you through why important perspective in urban mobility, and importantly, what is a gender perspective in urban mobility. So we'll be discussing that here today, and our 4 speakers will give us an overview of several important topics on this. So just as a bit of an introduction, these statistics are from one study in Ireland, okay? Across the EU, women account for just 22% of transport employees. 55% of women stated they would not use public transport at night. A UN status report on women 2014 says there is systematic bias in the planning, provision and design of transport systems. 1 in 3 women have been subject to physical harassment in public. And also, women spend 21 hours a week on average providing care. So that's in addition to compared to 11 hours for men. So that really inhibits and informs the way they travel across the city. So actually, if we look at these statistics, we see that it is really important to understand women's movements across the city and what inhibits this and how we can improve it. So a few bits of housekeeping. So at the side, this is important for the session, you'll see the chat, the polls, the people and the Q&A. If you have any comments, I would encourage you to post it in the chat. I will look at it throughout the session and then look at your questions and pose them and if there is time. If you in the session you would like to send a direct message to if they say something that you think is extremely important. So our speakers, perhaps if you'd like to send them a direct message to understand more about their work, I encourage you to do so through the direct chat function. And this meeting is being recorded, so everything will be available online after the conference. So this is just a reminder for our speakers, but they already know. So to keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking, limit the background noise. So there's an overview. So what is a gender perspective? We have talked a lot over the last few weeks, months, years about what a gender perspective is in mobility and what it isn't. So this image gives you a little brief overview of what I think it isn't, the woman at the side. Why is she not in the middle of the pack of men? I don't know. And so I would like to pose this question to our audience, to our speakers even. I would like to ask what they think a gender perspective in mobility is. So Rita, if you could go first.
Hi, Isobel. Hi again. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. There's not one consensus answer to this. I can give what I think should be a gender perspective, but I have to start by saying that from my work experience and from speaking with other women, women don't like to be labeled as vulnerable users or users that have to have special attention to, and that's often the image that comes out. So a gender perspective in mobility, in many cases, the way we plan, as you were saying, the way we plan mobility, we plan our daily journeys and how decisions are being made. It's not just being made by men, but even women can be making these decisions. They have no idea of women's experiences. And once they know this knowledge is not incorporated in the way we plan mobility, what do women need? What would be comfortable for them? This is not about perpetuating gender roles, but just knowing the experiences, knowing what women need. The data tells us women have different patterns of mobility. And a lot of the experiences women go through cannot be normalized, cannot be said, oh, but that's, because you're a woman, you shouldn't go out at night, or you should be careful because of certain situations. So we cannot normalize these experiences, and we have to act, we have to know what's going on, we have to collect the data, and we have to incorporate it in the way we plan, and we have to make changes. Changes are always hard, but we have to go for it.
Thank you. Heather?
Trying to unmute myself. Thanks. It's a great kickoff question because it puts into perspective really all the unconscious biases that we all carry around with us. So first of all, let's face it, gender and women are not interchangeable. We use them like that all the time, but actually they are not interchangeable as terms. Gender is about the social construct of a role that society then labels, and most of the time women fit into that label. But that, and I'll bring that up in my presentation, is particularly post-COVID, we've got we've had our social structures seriously questioned. So I think that's the first thing. Second thing also is, okay, let's just talk about women, and not put it into gender. Kind of tries to confiscate the objective that we're trying to hear. Women, we are not vulnerable. We are not all the same, and we're 50 or so, either a little bit more or a little bit of the world population, for goodness sake. We're not niche. We need to find our place at the table around transport. So I could go on forever on that, but those are really, for me, the two really key questions. Thank you.
Julieta?
Well, I'm sure that this debate will be very, very interesting only with these first interventions. And well, first of all, I want to comment this photo because it's really, really interesting in my image. Because, well, as we can see in the photo, it's a difference of years. And women, it's impossible to win this race. We don't have the same bicycle, as you can see in the photo. We don't have the same dress. So it's a good way to show the gap that we have. So congratulations to choose this photo to start our debate. So what does a gender perspective in mobility mean for us? I like to highlight three highlights, how to say. The first of all, I think that it's a goal in itself. The second, I think that it's a common challenge that all we share. We can see that we are people working in different countries and we all share the same challenge. And I think that we all have a commitment to attract female talent in a safe and essential sector, no vulnerable, and it's a good place to work and to change things. And well, I think that we only change this current situation if we all work together, all in the same direction. And I deeply believe that we have a lot to do, and in a networking way to start, it's the best way to start to work together. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Julieta. Now, Ines, moment of truth, if your microphone...
Yeah, hi. It keeps getting worse and then better again. So I'm trying right now. Like I heard you very well. So I, as soon as you don't hear me anymore, just like wave your hands around. So yeah, thank you. The gender perspective for me is a very, very important perspective to look at when we talk about daily mobility, but not only the daily mobility, but general mobility, because gender has a huge impact on our daily lives, on our tasks during the day, and how we see and perceive things, how we experience it, and what to expect of different modes of transport, different routes, whatever. So this is what the gender perspective means to me. And what it doesn't mean to me, I mean, it's been said that gender doesn't mean women. We're not looking only at women. Gender is something that puts us in boxes. That is a label from our society that we have a social role. And I always think of the ambitious manager male masculine food provider for a family. This is a pressure that experience a lot of men as well. So this is something that we need to address as well when we talk about gender perspectives. And yes, so gender for me is not only looking at women, but considering those social roles that we have and the tasks that result from them.
Thank you, everybody. So I would like to send you all off the stage now, and then I'll introduce you as speakers now, and tell everyone a little bit about your background, and then introduce a little bit about what POLIS has been doing around this. So as we just alluded to here, we're talking about gender perspectives and mobility through a gender mainstreaming perspective. So this is not just addressing a few little details here and there about how we can improve transport for women and how we can maybe get a few more women working in mobility. It's about addressing gender throughout the process. So women decision-making roles, data collection, is then implemented, and how we review what's going on. Is this working? Is it not? And returning to the beginning. So it's I don't think we have ever achieved a gender perspective in mobility. We've never achieved it. It's a continued process. That's what we'll look at. So to look at this, the POLIS Gender Task Force has been addressing some of these questions. So we've been looking at what are the main challenges. So who's currently dealing with this? So we've heard from people like Vienna, Lisbon, as we'll hear from later, Lille and Madrid, who we'll also hear from later, about what they've been doing, about what worked and what didn't, what we can learn, and most importantly, how we can create action now. I know that a lot of you listening here will have attended many gender roundtables and discussions and workshops about gender and mobility and about gender mainstreaming, and often they repeat ideas and concepts and actions over and over again. And we're hoping that today we can kind of think outside the little box a little bit more and think about what doesn't work and what really does work. So to do this, we've split this session up into 4 key areas that we think will help achieve the mainstreaming process. So we look at security in public transport and public space. So that would be Ines. Data collection. That would be Rita. How can we better improve our data on women's mobility? Convenience and physical access, and decision-making representation. So that's back to the 22% figure. Why is it only 22% employee base are women? Why is it? Actually, it's as low as 14% in many countries. That's an average. So through our safety and security and governance and integration working groups, so talking to lots of different individuals, and also here and again at the POLIS conference later this year. So introducing our speakers, we have Dr. I stress the doctor, she is newly doctor, Ines Kawgan-Kagan. So she is a managing director and a mobility expert with a special focus on gender. She co-founded the AEM Institute last year. We also have Rita Jacinto, who is a program manager in Lisbon, and she's been working on gender perspectives and mobility, looking at public transport and public space across Lisbon for a very long time, and with some really, really interesting research, which you'll hear about. Then we have Julieta from EMT Madrid, and she will be what EMT is doing to increase women's participation in the transport labour force. So she has served in the cabinet of the president of the Spanish Congress of Deputies and has been an advisor at the cabinet and the Justice Commission in the Congress. So she joined EMT in early last year, and she is a director of institutional relations and CSR. And then we have Heather Allen. So Heather has more than 25 years national experience in gender. As we heard from her introduction, she has a very, very good knowledge of this. So she'll provide some really interesting insights. And so her transport and gender knowledge covers both practical experience and research. She's worked not just in Europe, but Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And later on, we'll be drawing on this knowledge as well to look at what can Europe learn from across the world. So more recently, used by UN Women, the Asian Development Bank, C40 and more. And interestingly, she was recognised as one of GIZ's remarkable women in transport. And later on, we'll have a panel discussion. So to invite Heather to join the stage.
Okay, so that sounds good.
Okay, and I will be sharing your screen for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh, nice introduction. It's a great panel you've put together there, and it's great to also have this topic, brought to people's attention as well in this conference, because let's face it, we all live, or most of the world's population now lives in urban areas, so we need to really get our heads around how we can make transport more gender sensitive. So next slide, please, Isobel. Thank you. So I just thought it was worthwhile to go over a little bit of some information that we know. This is all very well accepted in the transport field, transport planners, decision makers, etc. We know that women's transport needs differ. So yeah, why are we having this session? We already know they differ. We know that they make lots of shorter trips, going from two different destinations. Next slide, please. And they make a lot of trips out of peak hours, right? They walk a lot more, they use public transport a lot, they drive less, all that stuff. Yes, we know all that. But as was mentioned in the introduction, the issue is we've kind of bundled all that into this one female person that doesn't exist. That's not the actual experience that women in particular have on a daily basis when they are struggling to juggle their work responsibilities, their care responsibilities, and have some sort of well-being of life as well. So all these things of what we think we know, I think has certainly been brought into question in the past 5 years. When I first started really looking at the gender area of urban transport, it was at the turn of the last century, so the 2000s, as it were, when sustainable development was really coming into play. And there was a lot of interest around the environmental aspects of public transport, in particular in the urban mobility space, and some notions about that financial aspect, and corporate social responsibility, and balancing out the increased costs that maybe you might have to have with environmental protection. Actually a lot less both understanding, tools, discussion around the social side and the societal side, and particularly the gendered issue. It's said very clearly at the beginning. So, we have laws that protect equality. So why do we need gender? I mean, why do we need to even really bring this in? If we make transport better, well, women will also benefit, won't they? So let's start questioning some of that. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Yes, gender and transport. I've mentioned that we do need to be quite careful about how we throw out these different terminologies, because not everybody understands them. We think they do, but actually there is a lot more to just using that term gender or women. Gender includes all the LGBTQX kind of communities as well, and women are just that female, binary female compared to a male. And in today's world, I think that there's some reflection needs to go on to actually the terminology that we use. And one of the things that I've been working on a little bit more is to use a terminology around transport disadvantaged. And that then does also bring in people who have disability, who maybe have a very low income, who may be migrant, may not have the understanding of how the system works, all those sorts of things. We have also an incredible invisible bias. And this book, I don't know if anyone has picked it up, it's a very good book. It brings in quite a lot of trying to transport examples of the invisible bias. And once these biases are told about them, they're no longer invisible, then they're very obvious. And I think that's something that we really do need to actually increase the knowledge around where are these invisible biases. They go down to women's employment in the sector, which is the same everywhere, because you might be sending a woman out to a construction site that's building a road way out somewhere. You might think, oh, I don't want to actually engage that female engineer, or I can't send her there. But we do need to have to, we need to change that mentality. There's the obvious example that most crash dummies are actually based on the male form and not the female form. And it took the NCAP certification people quite a while to actually work out why women were getting very fatal injuries to their vital organs because of the design of cars, because they weren't tested on women. And if you look at the signs when you cross the road at the Pelican lights or the traffic lights, you'll see a figure which actually looks much more like a man than a woman. And here Vienna actually really showed some very interesting changes, and they put up women's images instead of male, or something that was a little bit more female looking than male. So it's everywhere, this invisible bias. If you look onto Google, I looked to try and find a few images about shaking hands. The majority of them were actually of male hands shaking, which gives us the implication that this is a contract. This is something that has been agreed, but it's two male hands that are shaking. So there is also a lot that we don't know. That picture around the lady cycling, yes, women tend not to cycle very much, and we only know that they will cycle if they are encouraged to do so. So next slide, please. Thank you. So yes, we have a lot of very complex issues, and it's very difficult for us to actually untangle all this when it comes to let's just looking at transport and through a lens of accessibility and connectivity. This is a very kind of nice diagram which just shows all the different areas that we need to look at, and the issue is really that transport is not a technical artifact within a city. It is actually a social interaction. And unfortunately, because transport is designed, planned, and constructed and implemented mainly by men, and a lot of them are either civil engineers, economists, all those kind of STEM subjects, that we tend to forget that actually it is this social interaction that is as important as the actual hard infrastructure. So next slide, please. So this is some more recent work that I'm looking at as well in the area of the attributes of transport and how they are interpreted by men and women. And this is very important, particularly around the data that we collect, because if we collect data through the lens of a woman being, and a woman's needs being rather similar to a man, then we will not get the answers that we want. And I think that this pyramid shows very clearly that actually there are 4 really key dimensions of a transport choice. And unless we have the evidence base that actually shows how the transport will respond to these key dimensions, which we currently don't have, I might add, then we think we have really an important step to make in the planning and delivery of transport in urban contexts. So these 4 dimensions, the 2 at the top are really quite normal. Normally, when we talk about accessibility, it's about the physical accessibility. And of course, even within that, we have a lot of differences. The perception of a woman climbing into a high-level bus, not a low-floor bus, the height of curbs, the height of seats, all those aspects, the physical aspects, are quite differently interpreted by men and women. We have the financial aspect. So can people afford to actually buy the services that are on offer? Those are the 2 usual attributes that most people look at. But when it comes to a gendered approach to transport, we need to also look very much at the emotional side and the cognitive side. So in terms of cognitive, I mean, do people actually understand the system? Women look at a system in a different way to men, and they need to actually understand it. The way that wayfinding is put up, does that make sense to women? I could give a case particularly of people like women migrants who, you know, we've had a lot of women or a lot of families who have come from different countries coming to Europe. And the way they interpret that information about transport is quite different, both between the migrant families and the indigenous families, so our more European or normal families, if you like, and between men and women as well. So that's something we need to understand better. And the emotional side actually drives women's transport choices much more than they do men. Next slide, please. And we're going to talk quite a lot about security and safety in another presentation, so I'm not going to spend much time on this, but it's an area that I've done really a lot of work on. And what I've found, and this is all over the world, as Isobel said, I have worked really in many different countries, is the interpretation of what sexual harassment actually is not clear. It's different between men and women, but it's still not clear. And in working in Africa, we actually designed this pictogram to make it much more clear, particularly to the men passengers who were the perpetrators of a lot of sexual harassment, that these actions were actually sexual harassment. This is what we meant by sexual harassment. We didn't actually mean taking somebody and raping them and then possibly killing them or beating them up. That they understand. That's grievous bodily harm. Sexual harassment is much more nuanced. And so we do need to actually understand that better. Next slide, please. We know that sexual harassment is a key determinant of women making their choice about where they're going to go, at what time of day they're going to go, how far they're going to go, what mode of choice that they may take. So they may go by bus, but they'll come back by an Uber because they're coming back too late and they're not going to risk it. So it's understanding all that. It doesn't mean to say that there are no bus services available for them to take, but they won't take it. So it's not a case of build it and they will come, because if you don't actually understand the gendered needs, they will not come at all. And we actually interpret the urban realm from a gendered perspective is really important. And I don't think there's been enough work done on this at all. The importance of sight lines for women, the transparency of different transport infrastructures. These are actually nice, transparent bus stations, bus stops. But women actually also use transport as part of a social activity. We know we're time poor, so we need to actually think how people will use that transport infrastructure. These families are not waiting for buses, they're meeting each other and enjoying that transport infrastructure in a completely different way to the way it was designed. So we do need to actually really look at that. There's a lot of work that's gone on with the applications that you can get on phones around safety, lighting levels and whatever, CCTV cameras, the interpretation of how women and men have a trust in the CCTV cameras is quite different, and we need to understand that. Lighting, for example, if a man will make it beautifully, really well lit around a bus stop, but actually that's not what a woman wants, because she won't go into that space because she feels like she's just in a fishbowl there. She's actually spotlighted. The level of light has to be really looked into. A lot of research areas that are not well expanded. Next slide, please. So I just want to also touch really quickly on the recent 18 months or so of the COVID pandemic, because this has had a huge impact on women. It brings obviously an opportunity for us, but we do know that women have been particularly affected by the pandemic. They've lost more jobs than men because they're very often in part-time jobs and in lower paid jobs, maybe without any contract. I mean, all over the world, this is absolutely true. We've also seen changes in the way that people are traveling. They're not going to the CBD quite so often as before. So that initial slide where there was the hub and spoke transport, which is very typical, but it's not gendered. For instance, in Santiago, in the work we've done, we found that actually 47% of all trips in Santiago, Chile, are for care purposes. And in the US, they found that actually under 20% of all trips were for commuting. So we've got the wrong perspective sometimes in the way that we're planning our services. So this now, this COVID recovery gives us an opportunity to build back, certainly green way, but also in a more just way. And for that, we definitely need more data around women and other transport disabilities. And I know that we'll hear a little bit about that. These are extremely, I mean, there's a lot more work out there that people can access. The work done by the Fear Foundation, which I led on counting women, so that women count, actually has the first time that women professionals were asked what they thought about the data on transport when it comes to transport planning, and they didn't think it was terribly good. There's lots of other tools out there. So next slide. Thank you. I've probably gone over time. It's always difficult for me to keep to time, but thank you very much for your...
Thank you very much for that. Now, that's really, really interesting, and we've touched on intersectionality, which is super important if we are thinking about that not all women have the same needs, as you touched on, that actually citizenship, age, ethnicity is really, really important. And I get Julieta on, I have one question just to goad some of the people in the audience maybe, that when you talked about changing a road sign from a male to a female, if we're thinking about bias, now people might say this is political correctness gone mad. In maybe a few sentences, why is it important that we make these small changes? Why is it not political correctness gone mad? These small ways that mobility works around our city.
Well, the whole point about invisible bias is that it is somewhat invisible, and it's the same argument of why should you have more women on panels? Why shouldn't you just choose the best person for the job? But the world doesn't work like that. And these are all subtle messages that we are sending people, and we are also sending our children. So there is an intergenerational aspect that we need to make sure that women and young girls see other women in those kinds of decision-making places that will make a difference. I mean, that picture that you showed of a woman cycling, there are lots of different ways that you could interpret that picture. So I'd like to give you a really different interpretation of it. So we have one woman there she's one woman and she's worth 4 guys, because she's up there at the same level. She's not behind them, she's cycling with them. She's cycling in with a technically less performant bicycle, so she's actually doing more work. She's working harder than the 4 guys. She's up there in her hat and her pearls and her dress, so she's looking good. She doesn't need all the sports gear to make her look good. Yeah, she's perfectly happy. So, you know, it's all about interpretation as well. And so that's really, I think, a very, very key point. Yes, we don't need to go overboard, obviously, but, you know, bring it to the attention, make it less invisible, make it visible.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to invite Julieta to come on, and I think you're able to share your own.
Isobel, are you going to share my screen? Are you going?
Screen for you?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry, it's a little mistake. Yes, please. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Sven. Well, I'm going to start with the next slide. That it's, yes, thank you so much. It's very easy to know when the slide will be finished. So, well, let me introduce first of all Madrid MT. As you all know, but our company was created in 1947 and it's owned by the Madrid City Council. And since 2014, we became a mobility company, as you can see. Today, EMT manages 5 business lines. We have the bus, the public bicycle, the parking, the crane, and the cable car services. Well, I would like to start with the next, please, with citizens' role. We, as a transport, or all of us as a transport stakeholders, should give more options, offering to the users a public transport their space in decision making. I think that is very important. As a famous politician noted, by putting them in the driver's seat. And so it's a good comparison. Speaking about the next age of government, this idea and the new information age lead us to remake public services, considering our users first. As a matter of fact, in our company, we are just developing a new customer experience and journey as a renewed strategy to reinforce our relation with our clients. I think it's very important. Well, the next, please. Another important point to highlight is the percentage of women incorporated into positions of responsibility. I think that all of us are going to speak about the same items, but different perspectives. So, according to McCain's report, Women in the Workplace 2020, I suppose that all of you know about it or read or study about it, over the past 5 years, we have little progress in the representation of women. In America, since 2015, the number of women in senior leadership has grown and has increased from 17 to 21%. It's not much, but it's a little bit. Baby steps, perhaps. As regards Europe, according to data from Eurostat 2020, in the third quarter, women represent almost half all employed persons in the European Union, 46%, but they are underrepresented among managers, only 34%. And in the transport workforce, that it's already said, is even worse. Less than 15 And if you look at the blue-collar position, that I'm sure that all of us are working on it, it does not reach 5%. In our company, this is the first time that we are the 3 women in executive board. And besides that, in the last call for drivers, 14 of the positions were filled by women. So this is a very good news. These figures are not enough, but they represent a big step for the situation from which we started. The next slide, please. I believe in promotion, in leadership, and mentoring as a way for women to access positions of responsibility. And I also believe that the corporate policies of transport companies should put women on their agenda. It's important. And also facilitating their direct participation in decision-making and monitoring these corporate policies. We need to have men who believe in women, because in most cases, they are still the ones who make the decisions. It's essential to make men our allies, and I invite men who are in public and can share the opinions in chat. No? The gender issues concerns everyone. It's not women issue. I think it's very important to think about it. On the other hand, it's necessary to bear in mind not only the barriers that society sets from women, but also those that women themselves place before them. We are talking about 2 expressions, that it's the glass ceiling and the concrete roof. I'm sure that you are familiar with or working on it. We, in fact, are working in these terms and to do a turn up with this situation. So the next slide. I also want to share with you the concern about inequality in STEM vocations. Well, in fact, we are going to do a duet in our intervention, and Irene that stay with you after me. She is an STEM vocation, so it's very important to attract this talent. This means not having enough weight in the fields that are sharp in the future. And at EMT, aware of this problem, we have created the EMT Chart project, a very important investigation project. Our company, with Iberdrola, one of the most important electricity companies in our country, and Comillas University, we have created a chair for the promotion of women in STEM vocations. As you all know, but just in case, science, technology, engineer, mathematics, particularly in the field of vocational training for sustainable mobility. And we have main objectives in this chair. First of all, investigation of the causes of the low participation of women in studies related to STEM areas. Second, to analyze the adequacy of the academic contents with the needs to cover places in the companies involved. And third point, to encourage a necessary cultural and social change to promote the incorporation of women into the profiles of success in STEM degrees. As you can see in the slide, we were working with our queen. It's an honor. It's the first photo, who is deeply involved and concerned in this topic. So the next slide, please. Another turning point is the importance of creating support networks among women that promote this change. Our company not only considers the perspective of women as workers, but also from the point of view of users of public transport, with the creation of the Observatory for Women and Safe Transport on November 25. You know that this date is very important because it's the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So, by the way, we want to thank POLIS for being one of the first stakeholders to join the observatory, and we are proud to share commissions and working groups aiming the equality of women in transport sector. And I want to invite all of you to be part and to work together in this important initiative. So the next slide, please, Isobel. What we are doing at the observatory. So, first of all, to carry out an assessment of the situation of women as users of public transport, to identify those situations that may affect their safety. It's important that, as Heather explained to us in the few minutes ago. On the other hand, the objective is to propose concrete and tactical actions to promote public transport as a safe place for women. This is a very important message that we want that our users receive. It carries out its activities with the following 5 commitments. First of all, to share best practices to ensure the safety of women as users and as employees. The second, to give visibility to the female employees of our companies with the aim of creating new references. This is very important. We need references who will be able to make transport sector attractive to women and girls before. The third point, to create different working groups in the most sensitive areas to promoting research, focusing on the priorities we are faced as a sector, the regulatory compliance, the safety and security, the academic training, the wage gap, very important, and supporting and highlighting those women who can serve as a reference. And the other point, to share talent in our companies by organizing workshops and work together and share initiatives where we can value the progresses. And the last point, promote initiatives to reduce the current employability gap, very important. So the next slide, please. These initiatives support the achievement to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and it is aligned with SDG 11, make cities more inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, and SDG 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Madrid City Council has decided to include, and we are very proud of for this point, to include the observatory as a star measure in its plan to achieve Madrid Safe City project, which started in 2018 when our city joined the United Nations initiative. The next slide, please. Because we are committed to policies to support women, being part of studies and projects tending to the improvement to effective equality. I would like to invite to all of you to share your visions in this topic, because just working together, we can have a powerful network. So the next slide, please. We know that, I am finishing, as you can see, we know that society will not progress without the talent of both women and men. To bring into our industry a powerful workforce by taking advantage of their talent, intuition, teamworking, and leadership capabilities of women, we make us better and stronger for the future. So thank you for your attention. I have to leave. I hope that these ideas is useful for you. And now it's Irene with you from now. Thank you, Isobel.
Thank you very much, Julieta. So now I'd like to invite Rita to the stage. Rita is going to data collection and the need to change the way we collect data about women and understand women's mobility. And it really leads on from some of the stuff that Julieta was saying, in that, so is it enough just to have women working in transport? What does it mean to have more women working in transport, and how does that then filter down to the kind of work that is done to ensure that mobility serves women as a whole? Because I think we all can agree that me, 25-year-old me without any children, who has no idea what it's like to be a woman taking 3 kids to school and then to work, could really offer to understand how to improve mobility for all women. So Rita's going to talk a bit about participatory processes in how we ensure that mobility for all women and understanding all different needs. So take it away, Rita. I think on your screen for you.
Right.
1 second.
Thank you, Isobel, and thank you for your nice introduction. So I will start by sharing some insights we got from our data collection with women and girls about their everyday experiences, taking the bus, walking, cycling, and so forth. Before that, I will just give a brief overview of what I'll try to squeeze in 10 minutes. So it is reflections about data collection. I'll talk briefly, just a few quotes from our experience with girls and women during their daily journeys that they shared with us. I'll speak a bit about our experience at Bairro Padre Cruz, a pilot project we are running, and at the end, some reflections from our work and even a critique of our own work, because we're learning as we're going. Next slide, please. So, from one of focus groups, so we did one with women who cycle regularly, and she shared that she had to get up from the bicycle saddle while she was cycling on a steep street. A car with some guys passed by. One of them puts his arm outside of the window and slaps her butt, just like that, on a normal street during the day. She made a point of saying, "I continued cycling." Next slide, please. From another focus groups with teenage girls talking about their daily mobility experiences. These girls were mainly talking about going to school, walking or taking the bus. And this particular one spoke about she had to put her headphones so that she wouldn't hear men harassing her when walking home from school. Her mother told her not to react when this happens, so she would put the music loud not to hear them. She says, if I did, I would feel like I'd have to say something back, and that wouldn't be good. I'll say this already, many teenage girls know very well about and share their experiences of harassment. They might not put it in those words specifically, harassment, but they speak of how the looks of men change when they have a skirt in the summer, or if they don't tie a sweatshirt around their waist, how they look. And these are girls as young as 13. Next slide, please. And this woman shared with us her daily struggle. This particular woman embodied so many cliches. She was a caregiver, low-income family, and she was speaking of having to carry her son in her arms on a badly-lit street, going to the nursery and coming back while going to work, everything in her arms, and said, when it rains, then I have the umbrella, I have my son, I have the grocery bags. And I, out of ignorance, I was wondering, why doesn't she use a pushchair? Because out of my privilege, I hadn't realized that particular nursery can't have the pushchairs during the day. So they have to take their kids in their arms before taking the bus, because you don't going to take the pushchair to work, no place to leave it. So it was a big hassle for her. Just the idea of improving these everyday things would be like a miracle. Next slide, please. So I will speak briefly about the data collection from our work at Bairro Padre Cruz. This is a pilot project. We wanted to know how we could improve mobility opportunities for women in this neighborhood. It was the first time we did something of this kind. We had collected data already about women's experiences in their daily journeys, but not with this framework and not in this depth. Next slide, please. So before any field work, we took a lot of time to reflect on how we were going to frame our data collection, what we wanted to know, how we're going to organize our data, what the analysis would be. We tried as much as possible that our data collection methods touched on these key dimensions. So accessibility, costs, road safety, sexual harassment, social dynamics, convenience, personal safety. It took us a lot of time and a lot of discussions to come up with these key dimensions. But for that particular project, we found this was a good framework. Next slide, please. So we wanted to know from the women and girls in this neighborhood their daily experiences, positive and negative, mobility conditions, what were the barriers, causes of discomfort, opportunities, stories of how to get to work, how to get to kids' nurseries. So everything related to how they were moving on their daily journeys. Next slide, please. And we grouped girls and women into 4 groups. This way of grouping related to how we thought perhaps they would have something in common in terms of mobility patterns and their mobility experiences, also to help with focus groups and how to contact them. So we had teenage girls, we had young women, we had women working outside the neighborhood, and we also spoke to older women. Next slide. Next. So the first thing we did, we carried a survey at a local school with teenagers. We had 102 valid responses, and here we had boys and girls. And then we could compare the type of answers they provided. And we asked all sorts of things. Do you know how to cycle? Would you like to learn? Do you have a bike? Do you walk alone? You don't? Do your parents allow you to? Till what time? Do you like it? How do you feel if you go only with girls or only with boys? Those sorts of questions. Next slide. And then we conducted focus groups with 50 women and girls in total from the neighborhood. These were focus groups, well, the groups were between 3 and 7 people each. So how did we do it? We had a big map of the neighborhood with key indications where the most important places were located. And we had these stickers, colorful circles, representing issues. So for instance, maybe the image is too small here, I don't know. So the blue ones, the blue stickers, the blue circles represented bus stops that they felt they had some problems. So participants were given the stickers. We would ask questions and ask them to put the sticker on the map themselves. So we had a new map for each focus group. And then the participants would start to gluing the stickers, talk about it, comment on what another participant were saying. And with this information, we created an internal, within commas, application. Only us from the city council had access to it. We had all the data there, and we overlapped all the layers from all the focus groups, and we could see some patterns. These layers included all facilities in the neighborhood, amenities, bus stop locations, data from car collisions, and we could insert our own notes and photographs on this map. So we could have this big picture with a lot of information from the neighborhood. Next slide, please. We then also decided to conduct face-to-face interviews at bus stops. During the focus groups, there were a lot of complaints about bus stops, the isolation of some of the bus stops, the waiting times, the speed of cars on the roads close to the bus stops. And then we had specific questions about that, and we covered all bus stops in the neighborhood. Next slide. How we reached women and girls. So from our experience here in this project, we didn't head straight for participants. This was our experience here. We spent months just in the process of speaking to all possible organizations in the neighborhood before starting asking questions to women and girls. At times, I thought we were taking too long. Looking back, I think it was time well spent. It takes time, but you don't want to be known as those people asking weird questions to the women and girls in the neighborhood. You want to be credible. You want to be known by the main associations. Next slide, please. So I'll speak briefly about some reflections on our data collection, and as I said, some critique of our own data collection and perhaps the work as a pilot project. I think that's one of the objectives as well, to learn from it. So next one, please. So as I was saying, know the territory and the local politics. When it comes to the process, it's really key because it varies so much. It varies so much even between, even within the city and even within the same borough. This is really, really key. In terms of groups of people that the process is leaving out, it's worth to reflect on that even during the process. So there has to be time for flexibility. Are we having enough, in this case, you wanted to speak with women and girls, are we having enough diversity? Is there a group we're leaving out? For instance, in this project, we didn't make a specific effort on ethnic diversity. Maybe we missed an important group in the neighborhood. We don't know. We made an effort to have teenagers, we had them. We made an effort to have older women, we had them. We made an effort to have working women, we had them. So on the one hand, you don't want to categorize too much, but on the other hand, if you don't, some minorities or people that are more invisible, as we spoke here already, and less powerful to be heard, they won't be heard. Next one, please. Participants. The participants' awareness of the topics varies greatly. You have to be ready to really talk about what are you doing there, about what is sexual harassment, what are women's experiences, what is the process about, hard things. Because as I was saying, some women normalize what are those experiences. They've always had to have those strategies of not going out at night or all sorts of strategies. And they normalize them and they don't see sometimes the point of your questions. While other women know about it or have read about it, and you have to be ready to talk to all sorts of participants. When engaging with them, it's sometimes hard not to let our own thoughts come out. But we can't judge, and our experience is as valid as theirs. I know this goes for every field of research, but I think it's worth to mention it. As we spoke here already in other presentations, so participants may have been recruited as part of a group, but do never forget their lives are intersectional. And it's really worth to ask questions, to not assume. So from my experience, a woman might share her experience and I take notes, I hear, but if I don't ask the question, so how did you feel or something as a follow-up, I might not know what was the consequence of that. And the consequence might be I never took the bus again at night. So that's important. So number 3, as officers, researchers, mobility experts, I say be ready for discomfort. Some stories are hard, have to wait. Everyone has their own pace when sharing their experiences. And this one, I found hard myself. As colleagues, we all have different views on what are gender roles and mobility, and the theme is evolving. Perhaps some colleagues of mine thought this pilot project was crazy and we were losing it. What are you doing? Women, mobility? Is it, are we not, don't we all have the same rights? And as a final question, perhaps, asking about mobility patterns specifically for women is not the same as stereotyping the roles that women should have as a caregiver, as a household, to have all the household chores. But we're not stereotyping them. You have to ask the questions. So sometimes there was a fine line, but I'll leave it for maybe the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita. Thank you. That's super interesting. And again, we're touching on some of the stuff that Heather said about vulnerability and intersectionality. So what does it mean to be a female transport user? We don't all have the same needs. And what does it mean to be a vulnerable user as well? So now I will invite Ines to come onto the stage. Hopefully her audio is working again.
Hi.
Let's see. And you'll share your own presentation.
Could you please? I send you the PDF because I think it has to do with when I have multiple windows open that the quality somehow goes bad. I don't know why. So please assist me. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about these important issues of security in public space and public transport. And I just prepared a couple of slides, and I have I just like crunch everything up and be a bit faster because we're a bit behind schedule, I think. So I'm waiting for the slides, and then I will start.
With your old one, but it will have to be that one.
Yay! So okay, so as I said, security in public transport and public space. We heard a couple of aspects about that already. So I'm just going to ask you to skip to or to go to the next slide. So who am I? I am Ines Kawgan-Kagan, and no, that doesn't work. Oh, that's your that's your PowerPoint from the beginning, right?
Apologies, your PowerPoint doesn't seem to be working for me. Are you able to share it on your screen at all?
I'm trying to, but I don't know how the quality of the sound will be then. So I'm going to try, and then we will see what happens. Okay. Okay, you should see now the presentation. Is that right? I'm just going to see. Do you see the slides? Is that okay? Okay.
Perfect.
Great, thank you. So I'm managing director of the AM Institute, and we focus on accessible and equitable mobility. And we consult and train companies and municipalities to achieve gender and other different user groups and close the gender mobility gap. So I have been working on the topic of gender issues for more than 15 years by now. And yes, I in my PhD, I focus on the gender misbalance of innovative and urban mobility because the offers are mostly used by men, and I wanted to figure out why that is because it didn't make sense to me, and even more important, what we can do about that. So I'm just going to give you the key messages now. I'm going to give you insights into crime and fear, just a couple of numbers, and then women as captive users of public transport. And of course, very important, offering some approaches for solutions. And my main message at the end is that this issue needs to be addressed holistically, and you will see what I mean with that. Okay, so let's start with a few numbers. Well, a study from UK found out that 80% of the women in the UK have experienced sexual harassment in public spaces. And this is an average of all ages. And 97% of women aged between 18 and 24 reported such experiences. Interestingly, especially younger women tend to feel safer than older women, which has a lot to do with the severe experiences women make throughout their lives and the greater awareness the older you get. Another number is in Nigeria, 87.5% of the females stated that they do not use public transport more often because of the fear of sexual harassment in public transport. And it means they are using it, but they don't want to use it more often because they are afraid of sexual harassment. And another number I wanted to give you is from a study in Germany that gave women a voice by mapping places and writing down, noting the circumstances from situations. And interestingly, near half the incidences reported in Berlin were because women did not feel safe because of a suspicious person. And this number is number one reason, followed by 27% bad lighting and 12% lonely places and no one around. So there is a sentence saying that women are not afraid of dark and empty streets, but they're afraid of men, of people, mostly men, committing crime. So just let that sink in. Let's have a brief look at women's mobility. We know a lot of stuff for decades now. We know how we move, where, shorter trips, trip chaining, all those things. It's well known, but it just, like as Heather said, it never arrived in practice. So women often have a dependency on local public transport due to various reasons. And they use it more often than men, and they more often depend on it. So at the same time, they are more often afraid of using public transport because of security issues. And this is like just so insane to me when you think about that. They have to use it more often, but they're more afraid of it. And really important is the difference here between actual crime and the fear of crime, because already the fear of crime is what makes women adapt or better constrain their mobility, put limits. So women plan their trips accordingly. They don't go out at night. They avoid darker routes, different modes of transport, and they plan how to get there. And they develop strategies to deal with potential attacks, like not traveling alone or carrying items that could be weaponized, for instance. And this is something that we can see all over the planet. And we should finally make cities safer to avoid this and address the issues. And how are we going to do this? We are, I'm just giving you a couple of criteria that I collected from Vienna, because Vienna is like a great city with a lot of good work, very, very progress in that field. And this is an overview of criteria that can increase the safe and secure feeling in public spaces. So we have orientation, knowing where the destination is and how to get there needs to be transparent and visualized. And we have the overview and the visibility, meaning that you should be able to actually see where you're about to go, like the dark alley around the corner, or entering a side street that you don't see from where you are, or seeing what is outside from inside. So, of course, lighting and illumination play a crucial role for that as well. Making places directly accessible, like entrances to buildings, infrastructure facilities, or bus stops, and making routes possible without any obstacles there. And you might think, this is cool, so we do this and women will be safer, but there's more to this. We need to livening up. I don't even know whether this is a correct term, but that's what my translation tool spit out. So it means having or avoiding lonely places where there are no people, because having other people around gives a safer feeling, more confidence that, first of all, there could be someone helping me in a case of some issue, and in addition, that a suspicious person has less advantage of harming a woman. So we have accountability and resulting positive social control are as important as conflict avoidance because of the example possibilities of evasion due to sufficient space. And Cleaner space, of course, lead to safer evaluation of public spaces. So just remove the dirt. It just gives a safer feeling. This is so weird. I mean, it's just like something superficial, but it helps because it gives you the feeling that this place is not abandoned, which is the same as if there are people nearby that potentially could help. And really, really important, we saw that in the other presentations, involve women in the process. Not only women, but local women that know the city, that know the services, the local public transport. They know where they don't feel safe. Give them a voice, ask them, and let them participate. And don't wait until something happened due to something that wasn't right. Preventing and not reacting should be your motto. And you might have noticed that the suggested measures now in the criteria address security locally and not directly improve the safety, but somehow indirectly. I mean, it is not the places that are the issue. Those mentioned measures are local and do not tackle the underlying issue. It is people that attack and harass women. And this is not a locally defined issue. You cannot put that in a place because this is a societal problem of how we see women. And lighting might only shift the crime to another location. And we cannot just like light up every place that is there. We need to have projects that address that people, and mostly men, do not see women as potential victims. Victimizing women this way recreates the picture of powerless women as potential victims. So children running around here. I think this was it, and I just like try to be really fast. And thank you for having my input here. Ronja, sorry. And I would already like to thank you for doing something in your city and actually raising awareness and not just saying, oh yeah, that's a problem and that's it. Do something about it and feel free to get in contact to see what can be done in your city. Thank you
very much, Ines. Thank you. And I'd like you just to stay on the stage. And we haven't got a few questions that I do think that are really important to discuss with all the speakers. So Heather and Rita, if you're able to come on as well, that'd be fantastic. And if everybody could mute themselves just when they're not talking, that'd be lovely. So I think there are just a few questions in the chat. I think that actually they all touch on one topic, which I think is really important here and what we've all touched on as well here. So is that gendered, so we introduced this, I introduced this entire session with horrific statistics about the lack of women in transport, the unsafe conditions that we are subject to when we're traveling around the city, and often that we do introduce these gender discussions with, and they are super important. But what we fear does happen is that gendered needs often become synonymous with vulnerable users. And as we've said here, that actually we are 50% of the population. We are often over 50% of the mobility users, often on public transport, we represent more. And actually, often when we think about case studies about gendered needs, they often become wrapped up with disabled users, other types of users who have other needs when they're traveling around a city. So how we can better frame this conversation? I know that a lot of us, when we're traveling around, we don't see ourselves as vulnerable users. We see ourselves as 50% of the population, okay? So how do we better frame this conversation that understands what's, full back circle, back to the beginning, what is a gender perspective? If we don't want to see ourselves as vulnerable users, what is gender left with there? Heather, I'd quite like to start with you, if that's all right.
Oh, sure. Well, for me, there are two absolutely key things that need to be done. And, we've made a lot of progress, but we're nowhere near, and I mean nowhere near, where we need to be. And the first is on data collection. So the evidence base that we use for inclusive planning, whether it's for gendered aspects, women aspects, the disabled, is pretty poor, actually, even at European level. And in the developing world, it's even worse. So we have to actually really make great strides in that. That's the first thing, and we've talked about it. The second thing would be in terms of building at city and national level on two things. First thing would be to interpret the data. Analysis is not easy. It's quite complex when it comes to gendered aspects. It's not just, okay, fine, that's the number, this is the answer. No, it has a number of that need to be pulled together, which will eventually lead to the answer. So it's a typical wicked problem. It's this complex problem. But the way that we collect data doesn't give us the information that we need at the moment. And I think we would actually be quite surprised if we collected data better. And that's, in gendered terms, we need quantitative data, that's for sure. But without qualitative data, we do not get the realities of what women experience. And then it is almost of little use, really, quite frankly, without that. So that's, for me, is absolutely crucial to go forward.
Thank you. And Ines, I'd quite like to hear your perspective on this, because as we just discussed about safety and security, so what does this mean for you?
I'm not sure whether my audio is okay now. Can you hear me well? Okay, so I love this question of women being seen as a vulnerable user group. And whenever I see that in presentations, I'm like, oh, not again. So I'm like, just really, I cannot stand this anymore, because I don't understand how people can say that half the population is a vulnerable user group. In contrast to the other one, from where the harassers and attackers come. So it just doesn't make sense to me. And still more men than women get into fights and get hurt and are victims of crimes. But no one would ever consider them as being a vulnerable user group. And I always give the example of a drunk, young 20-year-old guy in the city going home after clubbing, who get robbed in the subway or something. So this is, like, to me, a vulnerable user group as well. And another thing is that just because women seem to be the others for many city and transport planners, it doesn't mean that they are a vulnerable user group. So discussion about women in public space needs an additional narrative besides working on the security issues. And we should focus on advantages of being women as well, and not only focusing on the disadvantages. Of course, we have to eliminate them, but there are good things. Women are more environmental friendly, they're more empathic, so focus on that as well. Lift that up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Rita, if we can keep it quite brief, but because we're nearing the end. But yeah, what about you? From your research as well.
So very briefly, I agree with what both Heather and Ines said and the focus. I would just add, so that I'm not repeating the same, that not all women are aware of this idea that we have rights and we don't have to make all these changes to accommodate what is seen as how a woman should travel in their daily lives. And when we speak about the vulnerable, I think it pushes a lot of women away from this topic because they don't want to see themselves seen as vulnerable. They almost feel like I'm taking a step back. I'm not vulnerable. I'm strong. I've worked so hard to become independent. Now you're calling me vulnerable? I don't like that type of research. It could be something like that. So I think we need to change a bit the discussion as mentioned already.
That's super fantastic, and we're and so I did have many questions that I wanted to ask you all, but I'm going to have to stop right there. And as I said to everybody, if you want to hear more about our speakers' work and more about their opinions, then please do drop them a direct message. I'm sure they wouldn't mind. And I would also like to point you in the direction of our Thinking Cities magazine, which has been produced by my fantastic Alessia this year, and it's fantastic. And I've just posted a link in the chat. And here we have heard from many other experts, including Ines, about what they feel can be changed in cities, safety and security. so just a little bit about, so I wrote it at the beginning of this year, actually, post a very horrific murder of a woman traveling back home in the UK. It was an event that made a lot of us sit up and think about what is our response to safety and security of women on public transport and public space, and how do we address, as we just said, women as vulnerable users, and trying to avoid putting plasters on everything. And, you know, like Ines and Rita and actually Heather also mentioned about, you know, if your response is just put a few streetlights somewhere, then that's not enough. And it doesn't address the deep-rooted question. And some of the experts in this about what they think should happen across cities, across Europe and across the world. And I will just, we have 1 minute, but I'm just going to share my screen for 2 seconds, just with our last PowerPoint slide, because this is how I quite like to finish. 1 second, apologies for this. I'm not even screen. Maybe not. Just because I would just like to say that action doesn't stop here, and we would like to know what you think should happen next. So we'd like to know, what is your city, region, organisation doing? Which initiatives are you working on that have worked and which haven't? Because as Rita said earlier, actually, on what hasn't worked and what other new stakeholders can be brought in. And as I said at the beginning, I encourage you to network with other people at this session, to ask them what stuff is going on in their city, and to network with our speakers to ask what they're doing. As we've heard, they've been working across the world on loads and loads of different projects, and they have a vast range of knowledge that I really encourage you to tap into. And it is 1 o'clock now, so I'll say goodbye. But so much to everybody. Thank you.